everybody, it's Stephen and Walter back again for another episode of So Chatty. I'm Stephen, this is Walter. You wouldn't think I'd have to say that after all this time, but I have somebody who writes comments on a regular basis and they call me Walter. Do I look like a Walter? No, I'm cute. Okay, enough about that. Don't be rolling your eyes. You know how your fans love it when you roll your eye. There you go, Mr. Magoo Eyes. Okay, let's take a look at what we've been working on before we get into today's topic. Here's what I've been working on, and I'm very thrilled with it. You know that I have been saying on my vlog and on the Idiot Quilter that 2026 is going to be the year of the bag for me. I'm going to concentrate a lot of my energy into learning and perfecting my bag making skills. This is really the first one that is not a tote. This is the Holland duffel bag. You've probably seen it around. It's got quite a following on YouTube and in Facebook and things like that. Lots of people are making it, and it's a good pattern. It is by can't think of who it's by now. Sewing Center, sewing something center. Anyways, yeah, I'll say more about it next week on the Idiot Quilter. This is just sort of a preview, but it has a zippered pocket on one side. It has a slip pocket on the other, and I'm making a second one right now, and I'm upgrading the second one. I'm doing some different things with it that I didn't do with this bag. I want to see how this would turn out. And as I said, the instructions were fairly clear for the most part, but we'll talk all about that on Idiot Quilter next Tuesday. So what else? Well, Christmas is coming, and you know that we've got like 14 people here for Christmas dinner on Christmas Day, counting Walter and myself. So I am setting up folding tables and making them look like big long dining room table in our rec room. And I need centerpieces. So I had a few little goodies that I had been making over the last few months, getting ready for Christmas, that were kind of like, okay, for one reason or the other, I wasn't going to make multiples of them. And I thought, well, why not take them and I have a hot glue gun, stick them together and make them into centerpieces. So that's what we have. We have two centerpieces here of Santa's hat and different little Christmassy things. I think they're kind of cute. I think they'll look very nice on the table. What do you think?
Yeah, they look nice.
Yeah, good for you.
I like your fir trees.
You like my fir trees? Yes, those are fun. Except I had a little problem. The two in the foreground, the greeny one and the bluey purple one, those are different than the white one and the green one at the back. I tried to print more of those type, and I was getting errors. They weren't. They were coming out as solid, and I don't know what was going on. So I did these other ones. I've printed some of these ones before. They're nice too, but I like the other ones just a little bit better. But they're just a centerpiece anyways. They're fine. They look good. And okay, what is this goop? You may be saying. Well, as we speak, my goop is solidifying. This is Turkish Delight. And we've had the discussion about Turkish Delight about a week ago or so on Stephen and Walter Live, I believe. And this is a recipe by Max Miller. And he is the guy who has the YouTube channel called Tasting History. And he has this recipe, which is the recipe pretty much reliable to the original recipe for making Turkish Delight. Now, I know some of you are going to say, well, Turkish Delight, you put gelatin in it. No, you don't. No, you don't. This does not have any gelatin in it. It is purely sugar, cornstarch, water, and then for flavoring, it's rose water. There's a little bit of food coloring in it, and that's it. That's all that's really in it. Now, it takes mass quantities of this stuff, and it takes a long time. I spent most of the morning after I discovered where my food coloring was that I knew we had bought. We found it in the car. It was in the bag that also had the extra cornstarch that I needed. This takes a lot of cornstarch. Couldn't find either one. Thought, no, we bought that. I went through the cupboard. I pulled everything out. I figured Walter probably put it someplace safe. He couldn't find it either. And then I says, I'll betcha it's in one of those bags that's in the back of your car.
And we never took it out.
That we never took out. Sure enough, Walter went out and found it. Now, how long had it been sitting in the car? Well, when did we go out and get this? A week ago?
Something like that.
Yeah, about a week.
So
A week
that's
ago.
not.
Good thing it's nothing that can spoil. Unlike the chicken thighs that I discovered this morning. Oh, by the way, this is not quite finished yet. It takes another 5 or more hours, or even overnight, they suggest. And then you dump it out of the dish and you cut it into 1-inch squares, and you have to dust it with icing sugar and all this kind of stuff. So right now it's only in the first hour of setting, but I think it's going to turn out. It smells like with Turkish Delight, the way that I remember it smelled. It's got the consistency of it. So the proof will be in the pudding, as they say, when we test it, when it's all done. And we will talk about this and show you a picture of the final product on Stephen and Walter Live on Sunday. So back to the chicken thighs. So in my madness this morning, and Walter was dead asleep because he didn't hear me going,
I heard you.
oh,
That's
and
why I woke up early.
oh, he ignored me. I went through everything looking for my red food coloring. And yeah, I suppose I could have used, the food coloring doesn't add any flavor to it. And I did have blue, I did have green. I probably could have, put that in. But no, real Turkish Delight has a red color. It calls for food coloring, red food coloring. So I wanted to make this original. So as I'm hunting around, we have a little basket that sits on top of our freezer, and where I keep what I have left of my spray cheese, don't judge, and my Ritz crackers, again, don't judge. And I pulled it off because I wanted to get into the cupboard that's above there, and this was blocking it. And when I pulled the cover, I see this baggie sitting there, this Ziploc, and I'm looking at it, what the hell is that in that bag? Well, it's raw chicken thighs. Somebody, and it wasn't me.
I've done that before. I rummage around in the freezer, and then I something's in my way, so I put it out of the freezer, and then I forget I've got it.
Needless to say, we are not eating those chicken thighs. No.
Luckily, there weren't that many in the bag.
Yeah, because chicken thighs aren't cheap these days. They used to be really cheap, but they're not anymore. Everybody and their dog, ever since we had everybody come over here from the, from Asia and the India and that, because they love chicken breasts.
I try not to do that, but I did it this time.
So there it was, this bag of bloody chicken breasts that had thawed out, and we're trying to figure out how long they've been sitting there. I don't think they were sitting there as long as you initially thought.
Actually, I think they were there from yesterday.
I think so too, because I'm usually up there at the top of that.
So I was rummaging around yesterday in there, so I have a feeling I did that yesterday.
So just a health warning here. If you have chicken thighs out for a day or two sitting on top of your freezer, do not eat them. You'll die. Okay, so that's what I've been up to. So Walter has now this isn't the premiere for this, but it will be on Christmas Eve. I will be wearing this creation. Show the creation. Walter has made my Christmas shirt, my penguin Christmas shirt. And I love the black collar on it. I think that sets it off very nicely. It looks good. It'll look even better on me. Mm-hmm. And how are you doing on yours?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, he's working on it. Good thing we have a sew day tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Of course, for you, it'll be a sew afternoon because you won't be out of bed that early. But anyways, yeah. So you'll get to see both those shirts on Christmas Eve for when we have our Stephen and Walter Christmas Eve social. More about that in a moment. But first, what's coming up? Sewing with Stephen is not coming up this Wednesday or the Wednesday after. We're taking a 2-week hiatus from that because, well, this Wednesday is Christmas Eve and we're busy. And plus we're having the Christmas Eve social. Again, more about that in a minute on that night. And then a week later, the next Wednesday is New Year's Eve. Now, we don't have any specific plans for New Year's Eve, but I know other people probably do or whatever. And so I just decided because we're having a pop-up sew day the next day on January the 1st, on New Year's Day, that it might be overkill. So no Sewing with Stephen this coming Wednesday, December 24th, or the next Wednesday, December 31st. But as I said, we have a pop-up sew day on tomorrow, December the 20th. I've already sent out the link to those of you on the mailing list. Sent those out at the first of the week. You just got a reminder yesterday too of it. And for everybody else, you'll find the link in the show notes below for this today. And it was in the show notes for both my vlog and the Idiot Quilter this past week. So it's there for you. We start at 8 o'clock, but you don't have to be there at 8 o'clock. I know this might be, I'm not sure how many people to expect on this one because it's so close to Christmas. People are probably doing the last minute scramble for everything, and that's fine. But for those of you that aren't, or you're so well organized you have it all looked after and you're going to be bored, well, come and work on whatever. And we'll go until about 4 p.m. Eastern time as well. Again, you can come and go as you please. Christmas Eve social on December 24th. That will begin at 7 p.m. Next week, you will find the links for that. Or have I already put the link in? Oh, I think there's a link in today's show notes. I didn't print that out. I'm pretty sure I put a link for it in today's show notes as well, but it'll definitely be in the show notes for Stephen and Walter live on Sunday and for my blog on Monday and for the Idiot Quilter on Tuesday. And as I said, that will start at 7 p.m. It is a Zoom. It's not a sewing session, but if you want to sew, you can. Nothing's stopping you. You can do anything you want to do. Are spouses invited? Yeah, if you've got somebody in your household, whoever's there, spouses, grandchildren, as long as they're good grandchildren and they stay very quiet. Otherwise, I will reach through the screen and I will strangle the little darlings. Yeah. But what are we going to do? I don't know. I do sort of know. But it's kind of loosey-goosey. It's a social. Bring a libation with you of whatever style you wish, alcoholic or non-alcoholic. We'll probably be having something, beer or wine, maybe both. Your snackies with you too. We'll be having some mixed hors d'oeuvres of sorts. I haven't decided on what that's going to be yet. And we're going to play maybe a couple of games, fun games, watch a couple of fun videos that I have found, and talk, meet everybody. And if you want to show us something that you've been working on, or better yet, do you have a Christmas memory that you think about at this time every year or something and you want to share it with us? That would be good too. Or you've got a...
Someone is at the new front door.
Sorry about that. We just had a delivery. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it wasn't from Amazon. But anyway, so the Christmas Eve social, we're going to play some games. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about Christmas past, memories, whatever. It's very loosey-goosey. It's just, to get everybody in the festive mood. And I also know there are some people out there, it's sad to say, but it does happen. We are an aging community as quilters, and many of us may be on our own. We've lost a spouse somewhere down the road, or our children have all grown up, if you had any. Some didn't have any. We didn't have any children. And have moved far away, and so you're not going to see them this Christmas. And you might be on your own. So this is a chance for you to, not sit there all by your lonesome self. Come and join in the fun with us as much as you can. All are welcome. And that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we'll go for a couple of hours till 9 o'clock. About that, approximately. Because you got to get to bed early or Santa doesn't come. Okay? And I've got to poison the carrot for the reindeer because they shit on my roof. No, not do that. We didn't used to, we stopped leaving Santa out milk when I was a kid. We started leaving him on beer. Mm-hmm. Which, well, I was older, so I knew there was no Santa. I knew who was drinking the beer. But we always thought that was funny. But my sister, she was still young enough to believe in Santa, and so she never questioned that we left Santa a beer. Whatever. Okay, so New Year's Day, pop-up sew day. So again, a chance to set the new year off. A lot of people don't do anything on New Year's Day because there isn't a lot of things open, if anything. Maybe a 7-Eleven, I don't know. Nothing says Happy New Year like a Slurpee. So yeah, we'll be doing that. But all of this I will be talking about next week. Again, reminding you and putting all the links into the show notes for everything. So, and sending it out in emails to the email list. Okay, so we have up already let's see, as of tomorrow, the first 20 days of the Missouri Star Quilt unboxing, our version of it, will be all available. Days 16 to 20 go live tomorrow morning, Saturday, December 20th. And then there's only one more session of those, and that'll happen on Christmas Day as well. So you stay tuned for that. Links for all the past ones are in the show notes as well, in case you've missed any of them and you want to get back to them. And I've already talked about the Turkish Delight and showed you that. So what's in the box? This is what was just delivered to our door. This pretty little box with a black bow. Kind of different for Christmas. But this is from our neighbors. Now, we had our neighbors in for a Christmas drink on Monday. Had a nice time catching up with them. I mean, they just live right next door. It's not like we never see them. But you know, we only do this once a year. They only get across our threshold once a year, or we get across theirs once a year. What's that say? I don't know. Well, at least we invite them. We don't do the ones on the other side. Yeah. So, these are Janine's. I don't want to dump them out here, but these are Janine's mince tarts. Now, we've had Janine's tarts before, and that sounds rude, but and they are delicious. And these look really nice. Now, she said she made 7 dozen of them, and they want to know if we'd like a few. And I said, well, just a few, because I mean, these take a lot of work to make, and you know, I'm sure she's having like for her family and everything like that. 7 dozen sounds like a lot, but it's really not. How many? 7 times 12 is what? 84. Yeah, 84 tarts. But she gave us 2, 4, 6, 8. We got 10 of her tarts, and I'm not giving them back. Now, Walter's not that fond of mincemeat. But that's a shame. I'm heartbroken over that. Yeah. And if you think I'm feeding these to my family, screw them. They're mine. It's my hand. Don't you touch my tarts. Okay. What else? Okay, so that takes all our announcements and everything. So we had a topic suggested to us by Mary Mack, one of our subscribers. And we've had, actually, Mary has given us a couple of suggestions over time that we have followed up. And that's just, before we get into that, if you have ideas that you'd like us to pursue here on So Chatty, please let us know. Put them in the comments or send us an email, and I'll look into it. Now, at first, this topic that was suggested, I thought, I don't know. But I did some research, and thanks to the help of AI, I love AI for this kind of stuff, I found a lot of stuff that I think is very interesting and I think we should discuss. So this is what Mary wrote. I wonder if you would consider doing a session on getting young people involved in quilting, or how quilting is taught in colleges and universities. I would be interested in knowing how your other viewers share their joy of quilting with the next generation. Well, you know, when I got thinking about this topic, I kind of thought, well, it's true. Think about the people in our quilting community. They're old. We're all old. I came into quilting much later in my life. I mean, well, 1, you do need to have some time. 2, you do need to have a little bit of money, because it's not a cheap kind of thing. But young people don't really seem to have an interest in it. And my niece, she was doing something on the sewing machine I gave my sister, who never touches it. And I forget what it was she was making. She made something.
She might have been sewing patches on something.
Oh, yeah, she was sewing patches onto a jacket. And I said, well, you know, sewing patches is a gateway to quilting. I said, you know, you should consider it, Sarah. And I said, I'd be happy to teach you. No problem. Nah, it's for old ladies. Fine. Does this look like I have?
Well, actually, you're saying quilting specifically, but basically sewing.
Well, sewing
would be, and you know, there's a lot of quilters that used to be sold garments.
Yes, that's true.
Moved towards quilting. So really, I would think it would be beneficial for young people to learn how to use a sewing machine and do stuff, because there's lots of tasks that you can do on a sewing machine that isn't necessarily quilting that would be beneficial, like hemming pants or making
Well, yeah, there's a lot of
alterations to
practical
clothes or
things.
things like that.
Sewing a button back on,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. So yeah, that's true if you widen it out. But young people don't seem to take the interest. But then that brings up the question, why? It's a creative art. Are they that glued to their electronic devices? Sewing machines are computerized. You know,
I mean, they do a lot of things for you now that the old ones never
Didn't
did,
they?
like automatic buttonholes
Yeah.
and sewing buttons on and things like that.
And a lot of these kids, especially the girls, are really interested in what they call vintage clothing, what we call is charity hobo look. But going, to the charity shops and picking up for next to nothing some old clothes. But also, I know there are some girls out there who like to alter the clothes to suit their style. So they buy something that's cheap and they do some things to it. But let's look at it and think about if you knew how to sew a little bit more, you could probably make some very interesting and original and unique. And there's the key word is unique clothing. Our shirts are unique because of the fabric that we picked for them.
However, I'm using a traditional pattern.
Yes, you're using a traditional pattern. But what I mean is you go into any shopping mall and you look at what the men are wearing, what they have on for a shirt. Well, most of them are probably wearing what Walter wears as his daily wear, a t-shirt. And they might fancy it up occasionally with a seasonal saying,
Actually, I have a t-shirt that I have finished that I've never gotten around to finishing.
Well, you should get on with that.
Yeah.
But not until you get your Christmas shirt done. But, women's clothing lends itself to more creativity in style, I think. And it's expensive to buy designer clothing or what looks like designer clothing. If you could make it yourself with a bare minimum of basic sewing skills, well, it would save you money. And then all the girls wouldn't look alike.
Actually, designer clothing for men is expensive as well.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a designer shirt, it can cost you a lot of money.
Several hundred or more.
Yeah.
Now.
Like I saw those ones today in a high-end store that looked like pretty basic. Could be fairly easily made.
Are you talking about Liberty London?
No, Simon's or whatever.
Oh, Simon's, yeah.
And they had a shirt that was just a basic striped shirt, but they used different colors of fabric, different colors of stripes, right? And on a man's shirt, and they were asking over $1,000 for that shirt.
Yeah. But to bring it back to quilting is a very creative act. It can be a one of a kind. There are many quilters out there that do not like to use patterns. They like to do something their own, or they will use a pattern as a jumping off point, as a guide for basics, and then they go beyond. I mean, I've done that, and I've made my own original quilts as well. And the process is fun because you're not doing the same thing as everybody else. And I think a lot of these kids today, they're looking for their identity. They're trying to stand out. Well, what better way to stand out than what you're wearing or what you're creating to make you stand out from the rest of the pack? But we've got to sell it to them, because if we don't, we're an aging population. And as we shuffle off this mortal coil, there may be nobody else to take up this art form, and it could become a dead art.
Okay, let's take your niece, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
She says, oh, quilting's an old lady's thing, right? However, if she had been presented the right pattern or something like that, maybe she'd take a better interest, like the Art East ones and stuff like that.
Well, that's what
or even the paper piecing ones, like what do you call it, the legit kits or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing. They don't know what's really out there. But that means the onus is on us, this generation, to expose the younger generation to the possibilities that are out there and try to hook them in. And that's what we're going to talk about as well today. We're going to talk about how do we get them interested in that. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the basic demographics of quilting. And I found, using AI, I found a bunch of articles, and I've kind of condensed them and fitted them together that talk about that. So they say the average quilter in North America is a retired woman in her 60s with an average household income of over $75,000. I don't know if that's US or Canadian, but I have a feeling they're talking that as being US dollars. So that would be even higher in Canadian dollars. She typically has over a decade of experience and spends several hours a week on projects. I'm not sure about the income of the household, although, yeah, quilting is expensive. And I know I've heard people say, I'd love to do that, but I can't afford fabric and everything else that goes into it. So, yeah, maybe. But the key demographics of the community include gender. Vast majority of quilters, around 98%, are female. Well, we know that. While men also quilt and have a history in the craft, they represent a small percentage of the participants. Well, yeah, that is pretty much obvious. And why is that? Because it's considered one of the fine arts, one of the well, back in the day when quilts were being made more for utility purposes to keep you warm rather than for their looks, and used up, old clothing and things like that wherever they could find fabric. Well, that was all considered woman's work. That was for women.
And a lot of men who might actually have an interest in sewing may not actually do it because they're afraid of being targeted as
being effeminate.
Yeah, effeminate or whatever.
With it.
However, lots of men do sew because they do sew for industrial things, like people that are in the boating industry and that make sails and
other
things and like that. And
well, then there's tailoring.
Yeah, and there's tailoring
and that kind of thing. I mean, I think the gender lines are getting more and more blurred. More and more men are emerging into this art. So there's something for the kids. Young boys would automatically go, oh, that's what girls do. I'm not a girl. But the young boys these days, though, are being brought up with less gender bias in many ways. So as long as we, as people out there in the education fields and things like that, present quilting as something it does not have a sex to it, it is gender neutral, then boys at an earlier age, there'll be no stigma. Not like when we grew up, you had to be a closeted knitter or crocheter or whatever if you were a boy, because boys didn't do that kind of thing. But I think that is changing in our society. Now, they talk about age. They say the median age for quilters is in her 60s. There's you get your old lady thing. New quilters often enter the hobby more actively in their 50s when they have more free time and discretionary income. Younger quilters under 45 are a growing segment, often connecting through social media and bringing a modern twist to traditional styles, which we're saying before, that individual creativity kind of thing there. And I think more are entering it, but it's still
I would think small. Though a lot of the people that are even get into sewing usually have somebody in their family background that sews.
Yeah. And also, again, and I'm thinking of the boys, if they have fathers that were creative, or at least fathers that were supportive of any creative endeavors that a boy would like to pursue that may not have been traditional gender role kind of things, then I think they're more apt to go into it without the stigma. But we still do have that stigma in the society. But also, I think the next point about employment and income, though, may affect the younger ones even more so. They say many quilters are retired with about 17 to 19% still holding full-time jobs. And then they talk about the average household income. Well, doing quilting and having a full-time job, what's going to come first? Your spare time, and we know quilting takes a lot of time, you're not going to have that much of it. So that's why it probably is put for either gender, and even for younger people. Younger people are trying to build their careers. They're trying to eke out a living so they can survive. There are some basics they want to purchase in life, like a house, a car, start a family, all that. All of that kind of thing costs money, and it eats up your time, depending on the kind of career you are pursuing. I mean, as a teacher, I would not, if I'd gotten into quilting when I was teaching, well, I wouldn't have got anything done, and I would have abandoned it very soon. I know that because even though I had 2 months off in the summer and 2 weeks at Christmas and a week in March off for that, that's not enough time to get into quilting seriously. with it, because also as a teacher, that downtime wasn't completely downtime. I was still lesson planning and prepping and reading and whatnot to prepare for my classes. So I didn't have the time to
Yeah,
quilt.
and I mean, I did sew a couple of times when I was younger, but it was on an as needed basis for something,
Yeah.
right? For a project or something while I was working. And I think a lot of people do that. Like, they may be working full time, but they might decide to hem a pair of pants themselves, or they might decide to make some curtains for themselves, or
Yeah.
something like that. And that's as needed basis sewing. It's not a hobby.
No. But I think to get young people into it, one, they need to be taught time management skills, because there actually is a lot of time in the day, even if you're working full time. But we waste a lot of our time during the day because we're inefficient in the way that we organize that time. So if young people are taught how to make the most of their time, they could do that. Second of all, they have to have an interest. You've got to instill in them, get them excited about doing something like this, because when you're excited about doing something, it doesn't matter how much time or how little time you have, you will do it. You will find the time because you genuinely have an interest. So I guess we have to focus our attention on how do we get them interested in that. Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. Then they talk about ethnicity and race. Survey data has historically indicated that a large majority of quilters, over 90%, identify as Caucasian, with no significant differences reported in consumer behavior across other ethnic groups. However, quilting is practiced by diverse individuals globally, including African Americans, Native Americans, often incorporating unique cultural symbols and styles. And this is, I think, when people think of the average quilter, they think of a white old lady doing it. But we know, those of us that are in the quilting community, we know that there are people from all races that quilt. Now, location, they talk here, which is part of this. The majority of data available focuses on North America, primarily US and Canada, which has a stable population of 9 to 11 million active quilters. Well, I think the first thing that comes to most people's mind that are non-quilters, if you said to them, where is quilting mostly done, they're going to say North America. And I think they'll also center on the United States. Well, why on the States? Well, the States have some of the biggest quilt shows in the world. And I think it's also connected with pioneer life, the history, with the slave times, with the Southern plantation idea, all of that. I think that's where that all comes from. A lot of that is twisted folklore as well. Like, for example, quilts were used to help slaves cross the Underground Railroad to freedom. That's a myth. That's a myth. But we've been told that over years that, people who were helping, white people usually, on the Underground Railway would hang out certain quilts with certain designs on them as warnings or as a safe haven or something for slaves as they were traveling to freedom. That's not true. That never happened like that. Did they have quilts? Yes. Again, practical, kept them warm, kind of a thing. But yeah, so there's a lot of folklore around all of this too. But that might be a way to get kids involved too. Tell them the stories, because quilts do have stories that with them too, the different blocks and things like that. So you might have some kids who are interested in history. This might tap into that history. It's not the old, like, the politics or memorizing the kings and queens of England kind of a thing. This is a more social history, which personally I like social history better than the political history of things. So then they saw overall the quilting community is predominantly a mature female demographic, but new technologies and online communities are helping to engage younger, more diverse participants, ensuring the craft's evolution and continued growth. So this might be one of the key things to get young people in. Young people like their technology. We have technology in the sewing world and in the quilting world. They probably don't know that. Maybe we can tap into that and use that to bring them to us or bring them into the quilting community. Um, and that would include the boys, because boys and girls too love anything that's mechanical, anything that's computer generated, anything that has to do with gadgets and technology. And we have a lot of gadgets and technology in the sewing and quilting world. So that's the demographics. So that's what we're up against. And I think you could change some of those demographics into a stereotype, and that might turn kids off. The stereotype, old lady, you're not with it, you're not cool if you're sitting there with at a sewing machine knocking out something. So that takes us then to looking at getting young people then hooked in. And we've already talked a little bit about this. So let me find this article that I found. It says, to get young people into quilting, make it fun. Yeah, kids love fun. Fast and relevant by starting with small, achievable projects like mini quilts or pouches, letting them choose fabrics they love and connecting it to causes they care about, like charity quilts. Create social, regular sew days with snacks, involve them in tech, social media, and other flexible evening weekend classes to fit modern schedules. So there's a lot here. So then they unpack this. Make it relevant and engaging. Philanthropy. Connect quilting to charity by making quilts for kids in hospitals or local shelters. The giving aspect is a huge motivator. And you want to know something? Maybe if you were a non-teacher especially, you may not realize how charitable kids, especially teenagers, high school kids, can be. At the schools that I've taught at, there was lots of charity things that were happening, and kids spearheaded those and organized them all. We had a big one every year called the Run for Life. I think it was Run for Life. That's not what it was called. It's for cancer. And they had to have teams. And they had to raise, I think, about $1,000 for each team.
Wasn't it called Run for Life?
No, it was called something like that. Run. I don't remember. It was to do with cancer. Anyways, that was a big charitable fundraiser every year at my school and other schools in the area. The kids ran it, and they loved it. They'd get right into it. They have t-shirts made. They'd have contests to raise the money, all kinds of things. And there's all kinds of other charitable things that kids will jump at a chance to be part of. So never underestimate them. They have all the energy, and and they make it fun too. And they bring other kids into it. Share family history. Finish old quilt tops from grandmothers or for grandchildren, creating heirlooms with deep meaning. This is a way to connect the generations. If kids have grandparents that are still alive, they love to hear stories about the old days. They love to see things that, their grandparents have had in their house for ages, and they talk about it. But oftentimes, their grandmother may have been a creator, a quilter. So
yeah, a lot of times though, I think kids get into sewing more from the fact that they have a mentor in their midst, right? Because unless your mother specifically sews, they may not get into it. If their grandmother sews and they take an interest in what their grandmother does, then they can introduce them to.
They often say that quilting skips a generation. Like, for example, my grandmother quilted, but my mother didn't. But now I quilt.
Your sister doesn't.
No, my sister doesn't quilt.
But she does.
But she does cross stitch.
Cross stitch.
Yeah, my mother never did cross stitch.
No.
But my grandmother did. So you see, maybe it's true. It skips a generation. I don't know. But think about the relationships that we have with our grandparents, when we were kids and they were still around. Didn't we love our grandparents to death? They spoiled us. We could get away with murder with our grandparents, one of the reasons we like them, but there was something less tense with your grandparents than there were with your parents. Your parents disciplined you. Your parents told you what you could do and what you couldn't do. You went to grandmas and grandpas and you do whatever you want. And they'd encourage it. At least my grandparents certainly did. And from what I hear from other quilters who are grandparents, they seem to do the same thing with their grandchildren. Your mother says or your father says, no, you can't have that chocolate bar. You're going to eat in 12 hours. Don't have that chocolate bar, kind of a thing. Your grandparents will go, have as much as you want. of course, there was a trick to that. Feed the kid full of sugar, get them on a sugar high, and then send them home. Bye-bye. Just to make their own children feel bad. It's kind of payback, maybe, for things they did when they were kids to their parents. But what I'm saying is grandparents, I think, have more of an effect on children when it comes to things like this, because grandparents make it fun. Just being with your grandparent and doing something like this. I remember my grandmother teaching me how to crochet. My mother couldn't crochet, but she had no interest in learning how to crochet. But my grandmother sat with us and taught us how to crochet in the whole bit. And that was fun to learn from my grandmother. If it had been my mother, she wouldn't have had the patience, even if she could crochet. No, you're doing it wrong. Here, let me do that. But grandparents, no, they let you make the mistakes. So, I think that's a way to get kids into these kind of things as well. Personalization, let them pick their own fabrics and designs, even if it's not traditional, to build ownership and excitement. I think here, again, I relate it back to being a teacher. And we've all heard the story where Johnny comes in and he's coloring a picture and the sky is green and the grass is blue and the trees are purple. And the teacher comes over and goes, no, 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 Johnny, the sky is blue, the trees are green, the grass is green. You can't make the sky green. You can't make the tree purple. Yes, you can. There's nothing saying you can't do that, because that's creative. So if you let kids pick their own fabric for something, even though as a quilter, that's not going to be right. They picked it. They're taking ownership of it. They'll learn. How did we learn? In anything in life, we learn from our mistakes. But if somebody stood over top of us all the time and told us, that's not how you do it, here, let me do it, you're not doing it right, that's a discouragement. You don't bother to do things anymore. This is why Walter doesn't make his own bed. He doesn't make the bed very often, because he was probably told he was doing it wrong. Comment?
I don't know.
He doesn't know what I just said. You saw the look. It went right at the
my
window.
mother never made the bed too much.
Oh, okay. Well, my mother, we only started making our own beds when we got probably to 12 years old or something, because she told us we wouldn't do it right. And if I'm told I'm not doing something right, I go, okay, you do it then. Fine with me if it's something I don't like doing. But I think that's what happens with parents. With grandparents, I think they'll let a kid make their own mistake. They don't get so uptight. It's kind of like, okay, so what? If the kid's learning how to cook and they put in baking soda instead of flour in it, it's not the end of the world. Just nobody's going to be eating that. But, they don't get too uptight. With the parents, though, it's got to be, you cannot do that. That's wrong.
It depends on the parent.
Well, I think it does depend on the parent, but I think more parents are that way because they're busy. They can't afford the time to let a child experiment. Or in my parents' case, are you making a mess? Probably, but I was having fun doing it. But my mother didn't like it.
Kind of like you when I cook. Are you making a mess?
Well, I get that from my mother, and because you are. No one needs to have every pot and pan out to cook a one-dish meal. But you do. Okay, they go on here and talk about modernization. Use social media, Instagram, TikTok to share their work, linking it to trends and showing off cool projects. I think that's a key one, because in this day and age with Facebook, TikTok, everything, what are the kids doing? I'm going to take a selfie. They're constantly got the camera taking pictures and putting up what they're eating, what they're doing, what they're wearing. Perfect environment for what they have created. And if they show enthusiasm for that through their pictures on something like TikTok, their friends see that, and their friends might get inspired to be part of the club to do that as well. Start small and build confidence. Quick wins. Begin with small projects like cushion covers, totes, or mini wall hangings to provide fast results and build confidence. Let's remember, kids have an attention span of nothing. Squirrel. They lose interest in things very, very quickly. So don't expect to start a child out on a queen-size quilt. In fact, you may want to start them out on a simple little 9-patch block, just to give them the feel of a sewing machine
Or
and
have
of
them
how to
do
cut.
something simple like a bag or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But build on it. Don't start with the whole enchilada. And again, teachers know this. When we teach something new for the first time, we break it down into the smallest little components and build on those. Because if we start with the most complex thing first, we've lost them and they won't learn anything. Simple techniques. Use easy patterns or even fabric glue for collage style wall hangings before tackling complex blocks. You can even use paper. I saw a YouTube video once where someone was teaching some kids the fundamentals of block design, and they just used paper and glue and put things together. So they basically made a little work of art from the paper, but that led into translating that into fabric and thread. So, and most kids can handle paper because they've been handling it since they were before they were in kindergarten. So they know how to paste and glue and cut. So you build on what they already know. Skill building. Introduce tools like rotary cutters and speed control machines to make learning safer and more efficient. Now, of course, I think this has to be age appropriate. I can't imagine giving a 5-year-old a rotary cutter because someone's going to die. And it's not necessarily the 5-year-old.
May cut off a finger or two.
Or, you know, can you pass me the rotary cutter, dear? Sure. Yeah, okay, not what Grandma had in mind as she pulls it out of her forehead. Yeah, no. And the same with machines, you know, little fingers, big needle kind of a thing. But I do know that I have seen YouTube videos where kids at the age of 5 or 6 are using sewing machines.
Well, actually, when we've been to quilt shows, we've seen like 5 or 6 category and stuff like that.
Yeah, where they made quilts, small quilts. Yeah, and they were 5 years old. So they were damn good too. So yeah, so don't ever underestimate, I guess, a child, but do keep safety in mind too. Then they talk about creating a welcoming and social atmosphere, fun events, host sew and lunch days with special snacks, making social gatherings where friends can join. Gathering friends where friends can join. Yeah. I've taken my nephews and nieces when they were little off to special crop days when I was a scrapbooker. And, you know, so they could work on their own little version of a scrapbook page or something like that. And they always enjoyed that. They had fun. And there were drinks and there were cookies and things like that for them. You know, feed kids, they'll come to anything if you feed them. So, yeah, you don't have to be all serious about it. And I think that's something that we do as adults, too. We have adult expectations for people who are only 5 or 6 years old. Might have to lower those expectations. Flexible timing. Offer classes or open sessions on evenings or weekends to accommodate work and school schedules. Kids are busy too, you know. We think adults are really busy, but kids, I think, and sometimes are more busy than adults are because they're in every sport that's going. They're on every club at a school. In some households, they're being tutored for, you know, mathematics or English or something like that. Again, to keep them ahead. There's a lot of competition in education going on. So, yeah, if you want to get kids involved, you are going to have to be flexible with the way you schedule it, I think. And it doesn't have to be long, all-day sessions, an hour, or even a little less. If this, you know, start small. Get them hooked, and then they'll quit everything else and want to do nothing but quilting. Yeah. Don't think so, but that could be a possibility. So then the other point that came up was about education, more formal education, which is something I hadn't really thought about. But what are they teaching in schools? I mean, I know what they're teaching in schools, but I taught high school and I taught high school English and drama. I did have scrapbooking when I was a scrapbooker in my curriculum. I used it for certain concepts in curriculum. And I'll tell you this, kids loved it because it wasn't your traditional read a book, write a report kind of a thing. It was more graphic based. And the kids loved doing it. And they came up with some fantastic things. But it says here, yes, quilting is taught in schools and universities, though typically not as a core standalone subject leading to a full degree. It is often integrated into broader programs or offered as part of a community education and practical arts courses. Well, in high schools and that, or even in elementary schools, it might be a club. It might be an after-school event. Maybe a teacher who is into sewing or into quilting and that might offer it after school for an hour or something like that. But it gets them interested in this. I know that one of my friends is the head of what used to be called consumer studies. Back in the old days, that was called home ec, but it's so much more today. And she teaches textile art, fabric art, textiles. And it's a fashion course. They make garments, but they make garments out of all kinds of cool stuff. They even make ones out of toilet paper as well. These big, huge ball gown like creations and very modern using toilet paper. I'm really not sure how you do that, but then
that
again,
might be a little expensive too.
well, yeah, in this day and age, yeah, with the toilet paper. But she has, the kids love her classes. I've been there as a special guest lecturer on some things, not on quilting, actually how to give presentations, but and make a presentation board. But I have said to her before, if you want to add like quilting, talk to me. I'd be more than happy to come in and, work with the kids with that kind of thing. We'll do something very simple. But anyway, she hasn't done that. I don't know how she feels about quilting. She's more into garment sewing, and that kind of thing.
However, like I said before, any kind of sewing is a jumping start to other things that you can do with sewing, which is one of those things is quilting.
Yeah. And also she does have a curriculum she has to follow as well, so this may not be part of the curriculum with it. They talk here, they talk about, though, how quilting can be used in more than just in a fashion arts or a sewing class. Like math and art integration. Quilt patterns are widely used in K-12 classrooms to teach mathematical concepts like geometry, pattern, symmetry, and measurement, combining visual arts and math education. Well, right now, at least in our province, it's all about STEM, which includes math and technology. And kids are not doing well in the STEM programs. They're especially not doing well in the mathematics department, because really there are those kids that love math and probably go on in university to study it at a much more advanced level. But there's a lot of kids that don't. They find it boring. They find it complicated and confusing. So putting something like quilting in, we all know quilt math hard.
It's a practical way to use math.
It is. And you can teach trigonometry with quilt math. You can teach all kinds of angles, measurement, and, depending on the level, whether it's like grade 2 or it's grade 12, whatever, you would set it, for that level. So yeah, it definitely would work for that. And of course, visual arts too, that goes without saying. Mm-hmm. Hands-on projects. Some schools offer hands-on quilting projects as part of special programs, art classes, or collaborations with external organizations like the National Quilt Museum. Well, that's one thing, but I'm also thinking about kids that are special need as well. Many of those kids struggle with abstract concepts, but you give them something practical that they can do with their hands, and you'll be surprised at how well they will do. And at the same time, they're learning some basic concepts that they otherwise might not get. So I think there's a lot of potential for quilting with young people that lends itself to enhancing their skills. Practical arts, home economics. In some regions, skills like patchwork and quilting are taught with home economics or practical arts curricula, focusing on skill acquisition and creative expression. Yeah, we just talked about that. Now, then you can go to post-high school, colleges and universities. Quilt studies as an academic. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln, UNL, is an international leader in the academic study of quilts and quilt-making traditions, offering the world's only master's degree in textile history with quilt studies emphasis. So that's interesting. When I went to university, never heard of this. I'd never heard of textile. Well, there might have been textile history because we did have a college in my university that we called it the Mrs. Degree program. It was all for girls. It was kind of like an extension of home ec in those days, where they could get a degree in domestic science or something. And we always called it an MRS they were getting because by the time they graduated, they had to have an engagement ring. That was how
There you go, stereotype.
Yeah, it was, but that was what it was like in that day and age back then. But now I think that has changed. I would hope that it has changed. Textile and fashion design programs. Quilt making and textile arts are part of the curriculum in many textile merchandising and fashion design departments. Well, there's another way to get kids into quilting. Show them they can make money from it. You know, appeal to their business sense, their entrepreneurship. It may not actually be making a quilt, but it's a related field with it. And also design, but merchandising, the whole bit. It's a wider field. I think a lot of people have a very narrow focus as to what quilting is. Oh, you're making a blanket. Yay. No, no, no. General education workshops. Universities and colleges such as the University of Utah offer non-credit, community-focused quilting classes through their continuing education departments. Well, again, that's extracurricular. But there's nothing wrong with extracurricular. You just have to get them interested. And then there's something called interdisciplinary courses. Professors at institutions like Michigan State University and Vanderbilt University, this is definitely American-centric, but we have similar stuff in Canada. Use quilting as teaching resource in diverse classes, including African American studies, environmental justice, to explore themes of history, culture, community, and social values. So, you know, combine that with the history of quilts, folklore around it. There's a whole lot of other subject areas that could be taught through quilting that might interest or appeal to an interest of a young person. So I guess the bottom line is, if we don't want to become extinct as quilters, we have to do something to entice younger people to take an interest in it. Now, you're not going to get all of them, but even you get a few, it becomes contagious. It starts a movement, you know, kind of a thing. So I think we should do that. So if we have opportunities to encourage young people in whatever way, whether you're a grandparent and, you know, you're working on something and Johnny or Mary come in and go, "Grandma, what are you doing?" "Well, I'm making a quilt. Would you like to try?" That's all you have to say. You may only have their attention for 5 minutes, but it's a start with that. And who knows where that will go from there. I think in this day and age where kids have too much time on their hands to put into technology, like their iPhone or their video games and things like that, why not introduce them to the technology of your sewing machine, of your long arm, of some of the other things? You know, that might turn them on to wanting to know more. They should invent a computer game that's about quilting. You know,
maybe they have.
Maybe they have. You got to make it a little bit violent, though. So, you know, people make guns out of quilts and shoot each other. Or, they could sneak up behind someone with a quilt and smother them. This just got dark. But, you know, what I'm saying is, well, you know what I'm saying. Kids like action. So you got to make action. There's not a whole lot of action playing a game where someone goes, "Okay, now we're going to make a 9-patch. Ooh, isn't this fun? Look at Sally sew." Yeah, no, Sally cuts off a finger with a rotary cutter and spurts blood, and you have to get her in the hospital under a certain amount of time so she can gain her life back, or she dies and you lose a point. Could be fun. Just saying. My mind works that way. Weird. Very weird. So I guess the bottom line is, because we're an aging population, I actually wrote this out, so I'm going to read it to you. Because we're an aging population, we need to bring younger people at an early stage into quilting and to start thinking of quilting as a form of textile art, not a craft, it's an art, that has a place in the education system and also a vital part of the social and charitable communities as well. Make it, in other words, important. Make it viable.
Also make it fun.
And make it fun and interesting. Yeah, and I think there's lots of opportunity to do that. And that's how we that's how we get them involved.
That's how you groom them.
That's how you groom them. Hello, little boy, little girl. Do you want to make a quilt? Ooh. Yeah. Okay, we're going dark again.
Hmm.
All right. So, do you have any comments you want to make about this?
I don't know. When I was a little, I had a certain amount of interest in sewing, it really was on an as needed basis. But my mom taught my sisters how to sew, and in the time, my mom get the sewing machine out, and she would teach me how to wind a bobbin and things like that. And she had me a couple of times help her cut out a pattern for a dress she was making or something like that. So that gave me an idea that you could do stuff with a sewing machine, right? Not necessarily make a quilt or garments or something like that, but there were things that you could do. In my limited knowledge of that, way back when, I needed to do something with a sewing machine, so I borrowed my mother's sewing machine and I did some things with it, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But you need to have that interest to do it,
and you need to have a supportive parent, because unlike what your mother was doing with you, my mother had a treadle sewing machine, and I was always fascinated as a little kid with the treadle sewing machine and how it worked and what it did. And I've always been interested in gadgets, and to me that was a big gadget.
Mm-hmm.
My mother threatened me with an inch of my life that I could never touch that machine. I could not. That was her grandmother's machine. It was old. It was made in about the early 1900s, and it was sort of an antique, although she still used it. She didn't sew that much, but she did use it. And I was told not to go near it, not to touch it, and do nothing with it. And that turned me right off. I didn't have an interest in sewing machines until I made my first horrible wall hanging. And that was only because we found a cheap machine. I wasn't looking for one, but it was on sale, and I thought I was going to use it for paper crafting.
Yeah.
And that's what got me turned on. And I didn't have anybody standing over top of me and saying, you can't touch that. So you see, I mean, yeah, you don't want a 3-year-old putting their finger in underneath that needle. So yeah, within reason. But when kids are told at an early age there's something they can't do, and if they're told in such a way and repeatedly that they can't do this, that will kill any interest they may ever have.
Yeah, well, actually, the sewing machine my mom had was a hand crank one, so it's not like you could put your foot on the pedal and just go. But she had showed me how to wind bobbins and stuff, and then I'd help. I was slave labor. I'd wind bobbins for her.
See, my mother was like you. Go away.
And then, but then she showed me a little bit of how it sewed and stuff like that, and I sewed a couple of pieces of fabric together, type of thing, as a sample. But then she had me help her cut out patterns and stuff like that. So only because I don't think she'd like getting on her hands and knees to cut out the pattern, and I was doing a good job. So
yeah, see, mine was the exact opposite. No, don't do that. You'll wreck it.
So yeah, so I had a little bit of a start in that, even though I didn't actively sew garments or do anything like that. She didn't really have me do that, but
it instilled a spark.
Yeah,
which
I was as a little kid, I was fascinated by the machine. It was a machine that sewed.
That was how that appealed to me too.
Yeah,
like it's a machine. Ooh, how does this work? How do I work it? I've always
and I fascinated me how it wound the bobbins.
Yeah. And that may be the gateway to getting kids, boys especially, involved. But girls are interested in machines too. We have to check ourselves in our generation that we're not being sexist, because we were raised pretty much that girls did one thing, boys did another thing. And it's easy to slip back into that sometimes.
And people still are like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there are men that won't let their sons do certain things because it's not considered masculine.
Yeah, a man doesn't do that. Well, what does a man do? What does a girl? Or vice versa with girls too. Girls can't be.
It used to be when we grew up, your mom cooked the meals and your dad worked from home, and your mom stayed home and cooked meals and cleaned the house and all that.
Looked after the kids.
Nowadays, people both work, so a lot of people now have husbands that share in the housework or the cooking or stuff like that. So roles have changed in the way modern families operate.
Well, really, even the word roles is kind of sexist.
Yeah.
What we should say is what people should do is they should do that which they are good at. Capitalize on it. It's always like when someone always says to us, so who does the cook? We got that the other day from a waitress. Then, who does the cooking? Then she corrected herself, said, or do you both cook? You know, like it was, what she was really asking is, which one of you is more feminine than the other?
Well, we both cook, and you have certain things that you like to cook, and I have certain things I like to cook.
Like Turkish delight right now. So there, we'll see if that turns out. But anyways, yeah. So thank you, Mary Mac, for the suggestion of this topic. I think it was kind of interesting. I had never explored it before. And if you've got something you'd like us to explore further on So Chatty, please send me an email or put it in the comment section below, and we'll see what we can explore. I mean, AI, we only have the AI to thank for a lot of this stuff. AI makes research really easy. I'm all about that now, except when it gives me trouble, like the two voices of Echo. I haven't figured out, but that's a discussion for another day. Okay, thanks for joining us. Come and join us on Sunday. Sunday is a very special day for us. It is our 42nd anniversary, and we'll be talking about that. We're going to talk a little bit about our relationship and why we haven't yet killed each other. But Walter's plotting, and I'm still trying to figure out how I can get this body out of this house. Okay, we'll talk about that in more detail on Sunday. See you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.